Do you ever feel like you're being watched? You all know what a first-person game and a third-person game looks like, but there's been some debate about what a second-person game would look like. The current consensus on the internet is that it would be from the perspective of another NPC looking at the main character. But the more I looked into this topic, the more confused I got. I've been prototyping a game with a digicam aesthetic, and in my last video I mentioned that using a shaky cam while in the third person made it feel like someone was following you around with a camera. A few people commented that I should actually try that out. It would be a second person camera since it's another character looking at the player. So I added an NPC that follows you around, stuck a camera onto their head, and this is terrifying. It feels more like I'm being chased. What happens when they lose sight of the player though? Should I switch back to a first person view? What if there was a way that I could keep it second person? I decided to make a grid of CCTV cameras that switch depending on where the player is located in the map. It's really fun to navigate like this. It's like a Resident Evil game with the fixed camera perspectives but without the tank controls. But is this still second person? Do security cameras count as another character looking at the player? I put up a poll in a bunch of different places. One to determine what person perspective the NPC following you camera is, and another one for the security cameras. The results were that the following person is a second person point of view, but the cameras were just a diegetic third person point of view. And I disagree with all of you. I thought security cams should count as second person. What if I gave them names? Are they characters now? Why does it have to be a different character looking at the player character in order to be second person? Wouldn't that be fourth person? Who are these people? I think there's some confusion between linguistic perspective and camera perspectives. The videos I've seen on YouTube all start by mentioning the person perspectives as I, you, they, and then map them onto camera perspectives. First person is from a character's point of view. Third person is a external camera. And second person is, well, everyone has a slightly different take. The most popular video on the topic by Nick Robinson mentions the mission in Driver San Francisco where you're viewing yourself driving a car from the perspective of another car chasing you. It's a great game, by the way. I have a rare Steam copy from 2012. Another YouTuber, Hoovy, thinks that the second person is when you're screen peeking in Call of Duty. In this case, you're looking at you from the perspective of another player. This one is fun. It's something I used to do with my friends in Modern Warfare 2. Intentionally allowing screen peeking. But in both of these cases, the person being looked at isn't really you. It's just a character that you're controlling. You're not John Tanner, you're not John Duty. Other YouTubers came up with second person perspectives that are actually looking at themselves using VR goggles. Ryan Trahan had a video where he tried to live in third person with a camera behind him on some contraption. In his follow-up video on a second person camera, he made a camera that's pointed at his face, like that camera in Minecraft. Liam Thompson decided to attach a camera to his dog and then looked at himself from the dog's perspective. And I think they're all wrong. None of these are really second person. Yeah, this is a beef video. I'm beefing with all the other YouTubers. I'm calling them out. This is a call out post. We're beefing. Drama alert. YouTubers are beefing. Wait, YouTube. Is YouTube a second person platform? In my opinion, second person needs to directly address the audience. You. Yes, you, I see you. No, go ahead, keep eating. You got a lot of drinks going on. Why do you got so many drinks? You really need to clean up your desk. The way I imagine a second person camera would be a camera angle that's looking directly at the actual audience. In films, the closest example I can think of is that shot in Evangelion of the audience watching the movie. Or with The Truman Show, the director thought about having cameras installed in theaters playing the film, the plan being that at one point in the film, they would cut to that camera angle of the audience watching the movie to freak them out. It makes them feel like they're being watched, like Truman was being watched. They didn't go through with it, but that to me seems like it would be a real second person shot. I can't really demonstrate my idea of a second person camera in this video itself because I don't have access to your webcams yet, but maybe if I made the screen black. Is your display glossy? Can you see yourself? Look, it's you. Hi. There you are. Despite everything, it's still you. In video games, this could be something like the iToy or the Kinect.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam! There it is.
Like in Just Dance, when they show you footage of yourself dancing. Or in Burnout Paradise, when it uses the camera to take a candid of you.
What the f is it doing? What are you doing? Why was it spying on me?
But is that even right? I don't want to be another YouTuber just adding another take onto the pile of second person takes. Where does the term first person come from? Well, it's ancient. It's derived from the Latin prima persona, which was derived from the ancient Greek proton prosopon. And that makes sense. Languages need to develop pronouns early on in their tech tree so that we know who is being talked about. The point of language itself is to share information from one person to another. We need a first person who's going to be the one talking, but they're not talking to themselves, they're talking to a second person who is receiving the information. When the first person is talking about themselves, they use the pronouns I, myself, mine. When talking about the second person directly, they use the pronouns you, yourself, your. But what if we want to talk about someone who's not involved in the conversation? That's the third person, and we use the pronouns they, themselves, their. I know you already know this, but it's useful to see how this looks all laid out visually. So these are the three people. In spoken language, this made sense, and we carried on those pronouns into written language. Now the conversation is happening through the medium of text. So we refer to the author as being the first person and the reader as being the second person. Things got complicated with first person fiction though. In these stories, the character is speaking in the first person, even though they're not actually the author. We imagine the character as being the first person. It's a more natural way of communicating what a character's perspective is. In plays, we had multiple actors all referring to themselves in the first person. The medium was now the stage and the audience. Plays allowed for a different type of communication that wasn't just spoken language, but body language. You could see the emotions on actors' faces and the actions of their movements. Then, in the late 1800s, a new technology was created that could enhance plays, the photoplay. Now artists could use filmmaking as a new medium, and with this new medium, a new language was developed. Visual language. I mean, paintings were also a visual language, but cameras and editing opened up a whole new field of what you could communicate. Psychologist Hugo Munstenberg wrote about this in The Photoplay, a psychological study. In it, he talks about how this new medium could guide the attention of the audience. But the stage cannot help us. The art of the theater has there its limits. Here begins the art of the photoplay. That one nervous hand which feverishly grasps the deadly weapon can suddenly, for the space of a breath or two, become enlarged and alone visible on the screen, while everything else has really faded into darkness. The act of attention which goes on in our mind has remodeled the surrounding itself. The detail which is being watched has suddenly become the whole content of the performance, and everything which our mind wants to disregard has been suddenly banished from our sight and has disappeared. The events without have become obedient to the demands of our consciousness. In the language of the photoplay producers, it is a close-up. The close-up has objectified in our world of perception our mental act of attention, and by it has furnished art with a means which far transcends the power of any theater stage. The close-up is an external shot. It's not from the perspective of a character, but it can be used to show the audience what a character is focusing on. It's still in the first person, even though it's not literally in their point of view. There's also a whole section about people debating whether this new medium counts as being art. So it's good to see that some debates are eternal. I promise we're getting back to video games very soon. Stay with me. The reason why I bring this up is that camera angles and pronouns are completely different sets of communication tools that we can use, and it seems weird to me that we're mapping this first person, second person, third person linguistic term onto specific camera angles. In filmmaking, the terms first person camera and third person camera aren't really used. Camera angles from a person's perspective are called point of view shots. What we call a third-person camera in video games can be used to enhance a first-person narrative. The film Oppenheimer, for example, is split into two sections. The parts in color are written to be from the perspective of Oppenheimer, while the black and white sections are third person. The screenplay reflects this. Oppenheimer turns, heads back up the hill. Strauss. This is one of the most prestigious appointments in the country. Oppenheimer turns back at Strauss, grins. Oppenheimer. With a great commute, that's why I'm considering it. I clean up as Blackett and the other students leave. One leaves an apple for Blackett, green with stem and tiny leaf. I pause at a bottle, potassium cyanide, clumsy hand shaking. I draw cyanide into a syringe. I inject the apple. While the color sections are in first person, the only shot literally from the perspective of Oppenheimer himself is this one. Besides that, every shot is an external camera, but they're still based on his first-person perspective, what he remembers about the events as they unfolded, the close-ups when he's under pressure, and the abstract cutaways to show us how he's visualizing physics in his head. Insert cut. A young me, 21, lies in bed staring up, crying. Particles with the vastness of stars move like fireflies. Most films have first-person or third-person narratives. The second person is more rare. A second-person narrative would be something like an instructional video directly talking to the audience, or a fourth wall break. In these cases, the camera angle is just shot at a character looking through the camera at the audience. So maybe that's a second-person camera when it's shot like a window for the first person to directly address you.
Go home.
Alternatively, what about this scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Hal is reading the lips of the crew? It's a point of view shot from a side character looking at the main character. By the internet's definition, this is second person, I guess. Or maybe it isn't, because while Dave is the main character, you're not controlling Dave, so it's not looking at you. It's just another character's first-person perspective. But what if you were the main character? In the late 1900s, a new technology was created that could enhance video, the video game. Now artists had access to an interactive medium. While second-person narratives are rare in films, they're actually extremely common in an interactive medium. What does a second-person video game look like? Baldur's Gate 3. Throughout the game, the text and narrator addresses you.
The blood in your head thrums and pounds. That pounding blood obscures who you are. Your head throbs and your skin tingles. Visions rush past. A dragon's wing, a silver sword, and a flash of your face seen through the strange woman's eyes.
And if you think about it, pretty much every game addresses you directly to give instructions. This new medium of games allows for information to pass both ways and have the art react to the second person. With this came a whole new language and furnished art with a means which far transcends the power of any film. We needed new words to describe these new tools. At some point in the development of computer graphics, we decided to call point-of-view cameras first person and external cameras third person. The oldest reference to this I could find was an advertisement for the game Battlezone in 1980, where you played from the perspective of a tank. This camera angle was sold as being more immersive, a way for you to experience what it's like being in a tank. Invoking the feelings of first-person narration made some sense. It's interesting that in games, point-of-view shots are immersive, but in films, they're gimmicky. Like Hardcore Henry, all of the marketing for that movie was about how it looks like a video game, and the experience of it is fun, but I wouldn't call it immersive. The first movie to be completely point-of-view shots was a detective film in 1947 called Lady in the Lake. And, okay, just look at how they tried to explain this concept to audiences at the time.
Striking an officer, resisting arrest, and murder, all on Christmas Eve. Give me your hands. You'll see it just as I saw it. You'll meet the people, you'll find the clues, and maybe you'll solve it quick, and maybe you won't. You think you will, eh? Okay? You're smart.
It's you. They're saying that this is your perspective. It's a point of view shot, and they're using it as a second person narrative device. Are you confused yet? I am, and I'm about to make it more confusing. The problem with using person perspectives in an interactive medium is that the three people are kind of blurred together. Think about how you describe watching a movie to a friend. I just watched the Mario movie last night. In it, Mario drove on Rainbow Road, and then they fought Bowser in New York. Now think about how you describe playing a game to a friend. I was playing Mario 64 and I swung Bowser by the tail into a ball. I'm talking in the first person, even though it's a third person game. Or maybe it's second person because Lakitu's filming you and that's another character. I'm talking in the first person, and I'm not Super Mario. Remember, in first-person fiction, we pretend this character is the first person. Video games invite you to be the first person, to become the character in the story. When you're playing Mario, you are Mario. You are John Duty. And with VR, you can even look down at your hands, puppeting the hands of the character like you're literally in their body. You temporarily suspend your own identity as the second person to experience the art as the first person. And that's really the goal of language, isn't it? To share knowledge between people, to step into someone else's shoes, to be like John Tanner hopping into other people's bodies, driving their cars around San Francisco, to become a more empathetic and rounded person. Unless the first person doesn't want you to see everything. In this scene at the end of the second chapter of Deltarune, the main character, Chris, rips out a heart and locks it under the sink. This heart is you, the player, the person that's been controlling Chris throughout the game. Chris jumps out the window, and we don't see where they go. The camera stays in the bathroom. You overhear a conversation in the other room. This is an exterior top-down perspective camera shot, and it's in the perspective of the second person. So maybe the camera perspective of another character looking at the player character does count as second person, since the player is assuming the identity of the first person in the game, but wouldn't that mean all third-person shots are also second person? Maybe all 9 of these camera shots I described throughout this video as possibly being second person are second person because that was their intention, to be a second person narrative. Okay, after all this rambling, here is my final take. I think using the terms first person, second person, and third person to describe different camera angles just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Maybe we should drop this terminology altogether. We have other ways to describe these camera angles. Instead of a first-person shooter, we could call Call of Duty a point-of-view shooter, POV shooter. Instead of a third-person shooter, we can call Gears of War an over-the-shoulder shooter, and we already do that. Hotline Miami has a top-down camera. Resident Evil has a fixed camera. The mission in Driver San Francisco, we could call that an NPC camera. This game I'm prototyping, maybe we call it a camera network? A network of cameras? I don't know. I'm still workshopping that one. I don't know. I feel like I've gone pretty deep into the rabbit hole here. I'm now suggesting that we shouldn't use the term first-person shooter anymore. So maybe this is a bad take, but I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, huh? This CCTV camera prototype is not the game idea I was trying to build towards when I started this game dev series, but playing around with it is so much fun, and I kind of want to turn it into a short game. And I also think it would be nice to work on something way shorter in scope after the massive project that Kitten Burst was. Just something like really focused, like Iron Lung. I see you. Have you finished eating? Do you need to watch another video? Here's another one of mine. You can watch this one. Or that one in the sidebar that you've been eyeing the whole time. Okay, bye.